As to my interest in Stephen King, it extends beyond the classroom. I do a fair bit of research, and in my spare time, I have a lot of grading to do, as most English teachers do. But when I have the chance, I engage in various conferences, sharing my thoughts and my research. Usually about once a year at the Popular Culture Association, where I'm a chair for the Stephen King area. So once a year, I'm able to hear other people write and share ideas on recent Stephen King works, perhaps going back to the classics like Harry or The Shining. For example, I'm working on a paper this year titled The Art of the Con, Stephen King's Cheap Magic, and I really look at how King really plays with notions of truth, not just for like police investigations or even philosophy classes or English classes, but the political arena. We're in very interesting times, and King is a very outspoken political individual, and I think his larger points on how we understand truth, how we understand and gather information is just beyond smart, especially within a piece of fiction where it's a safe space to have such an exploration, as opposed to yelling and screaming at a coffee shop or line at a concert. Other pieces that I have done include looking at Stephen King and the role of comedy within horror, a nice little bit of a juxtaposition to the dread and fear that we often see within his literature. One of my favorite pieces came years ago at a conference in Chicago, where I looked at the disgusting side of horror and not only listed every single just gross, wrong, raunchy element of Stephen King's fiction to see how many people I can make dry heave. I try to actually intellectualize the point and the purpose of every single gross element of Stephen King's canon. And if I were to say what the point is right now, well, I forget. That's why I write it down. But I have it somewhere along with a million other thoughts on King, again, from his work on his Dark Tower series, one of my personal favorites, to smaller little pieces like The Mist. That was a huge movie hit in 2007. But if you are going to watch that movie, be aware of the ending. It's probably going to shock you a little bit, and so you've been warned.